Okay, now we're ready to start part two. So we're done with Mayas. I hope you remember that. And we're going to move into Aztec culture now. So, Aztecs, mainly we're going to be concerned with their moving to Mexico City. So, in Mexico, the Aztec people migrated from the northwestern region to the basin of Mexico, settling on an island in Lake Texcoco. Sorry about my pronunciation again. Most Aztec books were destroyed in the wake of the Spanish invasion, but the work of the scribes appears in manuscripts created after the conquest, such as the Codex Mendoza. So, this is our first piece of Aztec art that we're looking at. So, Aztecs were migratory people and they settled on the island, as I said, in the 13th century and built their city where Mexico City is now. The place was chosen because they saw an eagle perched on a prickly pear cactus growing out of a stone. They interpreted this as a sign from God that this is where they should stay. Tenochtitlan was a series of islands and man made canals. By the 15th century, alliances had made Tenochtitlan a major power. Spanish conquerors arrived in 1519. Many books and much of their culture has been destroyed, but some post conquest books survive. That's what that slide just said. The Aztecs' capital's ruins lie under a plaza in Mexico City. So, one of the books that was made after the Spanish conquest was the Codex Mendoza, and one of the illustrations in that is this one, and it shows the founding of Tenochtitlan. And so, what I just told you about the vision that they saw of the eagle on the prickly pear cactus is smack in the middle of their drawing of the city. So, there's the eagle. The prickly pear cactus is growing out of a rock here. Um, and let's see, I think I've got a detail of this so you can see it. But the city as a whole was, I guess it was on very watery ground. There were lakes, and so they pushed them around and made canals, and that's what this represents in four quadrants of the city. There's many little cartoon people fighting down here. There's some battling going on. Um, and this is the center that shows the eagle on the prickly pear cactus that is growing out of the rock. So, this legendary founding by the Aztecs of Mexico City finds its place in the Mexican flag today. But in the Mexican flag, the eagle has a snake in its beak. So you can look at this, and it will be a response question. I will ask you what animals are on the Mexican flag, and the answer is the eagle and a snake. And you can also see in this detail over here a human skull on a spit. So I'm not sure what was going on there. But like most of the cultures in Mesoamerica, they did practice human sacrifice and bloodletting. So yeah, it's just part of their life. So at the center of their capital, Tenochtitlan, the Templo Mayor rose 130 feet within a walled sacred precinct. Sacrificial victims climbed the stairs to the summit of the temple of Huitzilopochtli, where priests cut out their still beating hearts. The other temple was dedicated to Tlaloc. So this site, this Templo Mayor, is underneath a plaza in Mexico City, but archaeologists have worked extensively on it and have come up with these reconstructions of what it might have looked like. So this shows a large pyramidal temple with two separate stairways and two different temples stuck on top. And one of them is dedicated to that deity whose name begins with an H. I try to avoid saying that whenever possible. But this one also shows on the stairs this smear of red that indicates, of course, the blood of some victims. Here's another drawing that apparently reflects what archaeologists found, that the pyramid was enlarged at several different times in history, and the enlargement just was making a shell, another shell over the old one, and then filling it in with some kind of rubble to get higher and higher and ever higher. I thought that was kind of interesting. I had to share that. So this next piece I'm going to show is the goddess Coatikul, may allude to the moment of the god, there he is again, Huitzilopochtli's birth. So let's look at this. So this is Coatikul. This was the mother of one of those deities that was honored in those twin temples in Templo Mayor. And when she gave birth to her son, the god whose name begins with H, he immediately killed her. So this shows her after that death, where when he cut her head off, blood spurted out of her neck, and it's represented here by two serpent heads that come up and confront each other. So what you see here is a serpent on the right and a serpent on the left, and their eyes and their fangs make it kind of look like one giant head, but it's two heads. Coatikul. Her name literally means she of the serpent skirt. And you can see her skirt is like a weaving, like a lot of little snakes weaving in amongst each other. Let's see. Oh, yes. She has, you see these human hands stuck on her chest, and this skull here, that's a human skull. These were not parts of her body, but they were trophies that she had taken from human sacrifices. That's how this has been interpreted. And the Aztecs also had writing, so I'm sure that there's some support for that theory. Now we're ready to jump down and look at South America. That's it for Mexico. I hope you can remember those three ancient, very rich cultures. But we're going to look down here. Now here's a fact that I want you to stick in your brain, and don't get confused at quiz time, that the only countries the only country singular that we're going to look at in South America is Peru. Okay? So whatever I ask you, if I'm asking you for the location of something that you know is in South America, the answer must be Peru. So there were coastal people, several different sequences of groups, of cultures, and we're just going to sort of sample them, and then we will go up and look at what the Incas did as well. So in the Central Andes, the earliest evidence of monumental architecture dates to the 3rd millennium BCE. This is at the same time as the pyramids of Egypt and the ziggurats of the ancient Near East. Some of the most enigmatic monumental constructions in Peru are geoglyphs, or earthworks, such as the hummingbird and other animals. They can only be seen fully from the air. So this is the only one that was included in the book, but I'm going to show you a little bit more. So the geoglyph is an earth drawing. And in these, the Nazca people, this is Nazca Plain here, they scraped away the dark layer of pebbles on the ground to reveal lighter clay and calcite underneath. So this is one of these bizarre things in the world that lead conspiracy theorists to think that there were aliens that had visited, because there was no way any of the people living in this area could have seen this. That there's no mountain higher. This is obviously photographed from an airplane. I think it's amazing that they were able to do the complex geometry and to scrape away these nice parallel lines and really long lines as well. So the wingspan's approximately 220 feet. Anyway, there's the hummingbird. And here's just a chart that I found that shows you several of these geoglyphs. So there's a lot more than just the hummingbird. This is the point, and they're all kind of different and very interesting. So here's two more I had to show you. My favorite, the little spider over here with all the parallel lines scraped out in this big spider body. And then, of course, the monkey is just very cool, kind of playful, not so naturalistic, but look at this amazing tail over here. So that's very cool. These are the Nazca lines. And what country are they in? Why, they're in Peru. Moche culture. This one had a very long lifespan. It created a lot of ceramics. They were very advanced in that craft. So Moche culture lived along the coast of Peru, spanning the Piura Valley. Let me see if I have a map. Sorry, no. To Warme Valley in modern Peru. The Moche built adobe pyramids, that is mud bricks, and were talented potters and metalsmiths. So this culture flourished between about 100 BCE to 700 CE. This is a Moche vessel. They created hundreds of these, if not thousands of these. They're called stirrup vessels because the spout has this unusual kind of curved piece with then a straight piece coming out of it that the archaeologists thought looked like a stirrup, because it does. So they call them stirrup vessels. What I think is interesting is this figure with his little cat here, and ear ornaments, very fancy headdress up here. But notice the pigments of his face. This indicates some kind of ritualistic face painting, I'm pretty sure, because I'm going to show you some more with it. So very dark areas on the side and a very light area in the middle. That's that one. Here, this one is a bonus feature. It just happens to be my favorite of all the stirrup vessels because I'm just so amazed at how naturalistic it is. Just look at the way that the face has been modeled, even the wrinkles around the lips, the mouth, the nose, everything just reflects keen observation of the human form and the ability to reproduce that in clay. It's just totally amazing. I think he's gorgeous. And then here are two of these stirrup vessels from the Mint Museum. So I told you the painting, the pigmentation on that little man with the cat, we would see again. So here they are, the light area down the middle and dark areas on either side. I think these were actually on display when I was in the museum. And then this one's also in the Mint Museum, but it was not on display, but I couldn't resist. He's such a cute little guy, a little mouse effigy eating some corn. So I know you want to know what the liquid was that was kept in the bottles, don't you? I'm sorry, I cannot help you on that, but Google might. So here's another really interesting piece. This is the first piece of metal I have shown you. So the Moche and South America seems to be the only place where there's any metal work at all before the arrival of the Spanish. And the only metal they have is gold. And the only thing they use it for is ornaments. So there's no metal weapons, nothing. Just remember that. So this is one of the ear ornaments that we have seen reflected in figures of humans. And so it's an ear spool, it's called, from Peru, obviously, gold. And here's this little man, this little warrior in the middle. Even he has on ear ornaments, these jade circles on his ears, and a big fancy headdress, an exaggerated head. He's not really very naturalistic, and he's got two little soldiers back here. So I think these things are amazing, and it was stuff like this that fired up the greed of the Spanish invaders when they came and they saw that the peoples of Peru had gold. They just got hungry for gold and started taking it all. So when you find something that survived, you want to say, oh, I'm so glad it wasn't melted down. So it's very cool. So now let's look at the Inca Empire up in the mountains. And this is the site that is probably on everybody's bucket list. I know it's on my bucket list. I hope to get there someday. So the capital of the Incan Empire was in Cusco, and it was the center of a territory extending 2,600 miles long by 1500 CE. Religion, bureaucracy, and labor taxation united the empire's peoples. More than 23,000 miles of roads connected the farthest reaches of the empire to the capital. So this shows Machu Picchu. It is viewed from an adjacent peak here, dating from the 15th century. It's 9,000 feet up in the mountains. It's special because it was never seen by the Spanish conquistadors. It wasn't seen by a Westerner until 1911, and that person was Hiram Bingham. It is kind of small in terms of the Inca settlements, but it was significant because nobody had seen it, nobody had looted it. It was likely the summer home of an important leader. Some of the granite stones were more finished, so there's different degrees of finish on the structures that you can see here, revealing a hierarchy of occupants, most likely. So there's some buildings are finished really well, and that would be more labor intensive, so that would be the leaders of the group, most likely. All these are just theories. Some stones are 27 feet tall. So that's a view of Machu Picchu, and you can see this opening courtyard in the center of this plaza. And here's some of the houses. So now look at the stonework here, and you can see that it's not real fine. It looks kind of coarse. They're very bumpy looking. They also have peaked roofs or pitched roofs where there would have been a roof material of something that didn't survive, like wood or rush, like thatching. So this is what's left, but they look very much like houses with doors and windows and roofs, peeking for roofs. So this is Machu Picchu. And here's a picture that illustrates the two different degrees of stonework. So this is the rough one like we just saw, and then there's stonework that is really well finished with no gaps between the stones and looking like stonework in Greece, maybe. So here's a building in Cusco. This is the remains of the Temple of the Sun down here, the Inca temple. And when the Spanish invaded, they just planted a church right on top of it, the Church of Santo Domingo. But you can see clearly the ruins down there. And this shows, again, that fine stonework. All right, so that's really well done. And this is a piece of textile work from the Incas. So I hope you remember, although it was a really long time ago, in Guns, Germs, and Steel, when Jared Diamond talked about the different domesticated animals, the main one of South America was the llamas and alpacas, that they were domesticated, but they were not super helpful. But they did give wool, they gave their fleece. And so that's what this is. It is made of llama or alpaca fiber. It's called camelid fiber. And it's been woven in narrow strips with very distinct patterns. Each pattern had some sort of a meaning, a symbolic meaning. It represented something. And then the strips are all joined together. This is called a tunic, but it's like a poncho, where a head slit would be there, so you would stick your head through it and it would drape over your body. It would be super soft and super warm. So Hernan Cortés arrived in Cuba in 1519, taking control of Tenochtitlan within 2 years. Francisco Pizarro led an expedition to South America that resulted in seizing Cusco from the Incans in 1533. Native American populations declined as much as 90% following contact with Europe. Yeah. And this is the end of part 2. So stay tuned. There's one more part. We're going to visit North America.